Welcome to this year International Women's Day celebration that we are commemorating by having this round table. My name is Stephen David Kirori. I am the Director, Regional Academies, and I'm here to just welcome you to this session and to let you know that we have organized a panel of some very powerful speakers that we are going to share some insights into this year's theme and also to celebrate and remember all the great work that women have put in. As we come to this year, I know it's a celebration that we are working with the background that we have come from a very difficult and chaotic year, 2020, where we had what we could not expect globally. So it's a time that I believe that we must celebrate women in the front line. We must celebrate the good work and the strong things that the women have done in the back end of the offices. We want to celebrate the shop assistants that have been there and the floor assistants, the salespeople, the mothers who take care of our children, and so many people that have gone through this difficult moment and survived the resilience of what last year brought us into. I know we have good speakers here today that are going to tell us more about the topic of the day, but mine is to introduce the team that we have here and to welcome you formally to Strathmore Business School webinar. We have a number of series of webinars, and this is one of them. And for us, we take this day to be a very serious day in our calendar, and hence we need to celebrate it together with the rest of the world. With me, I have the team from the business school, headed by our Director Executive Education, Eda Munyi. I don't know whether you have your video on, maybe you can just show. We have Nancy, that's
Morning.
Eda. Morning. We have Nancy Derangu, who has been working hard to put up the event. And we have a lot of technical team people who are working in the background, led by Caroline, our events manager. Caroline, maybe if you can just show yourself a minute. I know you're working in the background.
Good morning and welcome, everyone.
Thank you. And we have a lot of team members who are working, the IT team, the events team, the ones who are beaming this event now live in all our social media. Thank you all for the support. Mine is just to introduce our moderator for the day. Since we have already had a video just that shows clearly a bit of about Strathmore, I will invite our moderator for this day, Sima D'Souza, who will take us through the program, and I will come back with you later at the end of the day. Sima, please welcome and take charge of the event.
Good morning, everyone. What a lovely day it is today. Thank you so much for inviting me to choose to moderate this session. I'm truly honored, and especially considering the panel that we have put together for you today. It's very exciting, and I'm actually quite overwhelmed, actually, that I am moderating this set of panelists. After reading their profiles, I think I was really, truly overwhelmed, and you will see that yourself as I introduce them later on. What I would like to do first of all is to introduce our keynote speaker who will take us through International Women's Day, what it means, what is the significance of the same, what has been the impact of 2020 on women, and also just, a moment to celebrating women, when it comes to social, economic, cultural, political achievements, and her thoughts on that. She has incredible nuggets of wisdom when it comes to women and accelerating gender parity, which is really what we're here for today. The theme of International Women's Day for 2021 is really quite empowering. Choose to challenge. And I think everyone on this call maybe should take a moment just to show the hand gesture that is associated with choose to challenge. I'm not sure if everyone knows it, but if you could just follow what I'm gonna do, and I think everyone should know it. It's very simple. It's literally like giving everyone a high five. And that's what we're going to do today is everyone, if you could just put your hands up, this is a symbol for choosing to challenge. Peter, fantastic. It's great. So hereby we all commit to make sure that we're accelerating gender parity as we put our hands up, and we're choosing to challenge what we've seen in the past as being debilitating for women's growth. And so thank you all for committing by putting your hands up. And I'd now like to just introduce the keynote speaker who will share her nuggets with us. Now, when her profile was sent to me, it was a very long profile, and I was actually struggling, thinking, okay, I do need to manage time here. And so what can I cut out? But, you know, I just can't. And I think that as you hear what I'm about to say, you will actually all be in awe with respect to the achievements of this lady. I'd like to introduce Ambassador Masegoa. Ambassador Masegoa was appointed as the Botswana's second ambassador to the Federal Republic of Germany. She is an international civil servant and has 30 years of senior level experience in the fields of business, development, multilateral diplomacy. She also served as the Deputy Secretary General of the Commonwealth for a period of 6 years, up to 2014. She was then nominated and endorsed as the Africa candidate for the position of Secretary General during the elections held in Malta. Her extensive experience and exposure includes 16 years in the telecom sector with Botswana Telecoms Corporation, where she emerged as one of the most influential female executives. She was the first Botswana Chief Executive Officer of the Botswana Export Development and Investment Authority, where one of her key projects was the establishment of a global export and international export development platform, and the initiation and the development of the national brand called Brand Botswana. She holds a BSc in electronics and physics. I had to stop there when I read this, you know, because this is really, truly choosing to challenge. Electronics and physics is typically a career that men go into. And so I truly salute you for actually taking that hard road and doing that against all norms. Holding a BSc in electronics and physics from the University of London, an MBA from the University of Pittsburgh, a Bachelor of Law degree and an Advanced Management Diploma from IESC in Spain. She's also a certified executive coach and trainer, having established a private company offering soft skills training focusing on leadership, accountability, and board governance. Ambassador Masegoa has also served on various boards and community service institutions in the fields of tourism, business, civil aviation, and banking, amongst others. She's been recognized through several awards, as you can imagine, over time. And her latest was when she was awarded an International Women in Leadership by Dr. Long at the London Political Summit in London. She is married to Bishop Mwamba, has 3 children, Eno, Senio, and Lukwesa. Now, ladies and gentlemen, certainly that is challenging the norms. I don't think I've seen a credential list that long. We salute you, Ambassador Masegoa, for challenging the norms and invite you to take it away as you share your nuggets of wisdom with us. Welcome.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of you who got up so early. My challenge for today was just being here on time because I'm speaking to you from Berlin and it's 6:11. Over the years, there has been a global challenge, particularly around this time of the year, around Women's Day, to pause and reflect, to share experiences around particular themes, recognizing that there has been some progress made in promoting women's rights. The purpose of these sessions is primarily to offer an opportunity for us to continue to spotlight the issue so that collectively we do not lose sight of the work that still needs to be done. We continue to do more, we continue to do better, especially around the issue of women in leadership. So may I just start by thanking those that came up with the themes for us to reflect on, particularly this year's theme of choosing to challenge. The first challenge I had this morning, as I just stated, was being up and on time to get here. I thank Strathmore University Business School for the invitation and look forward to the discussion as we unpack and unbundle this theme that we have in front of us of choosing to challenge. I thought I would just start off by giving a short outline of my leadership journey, not as an end in itself, but as I speak of leadership, how we can take what it is that we know, how we can apply our skills and competencies and interests. And as a woman, indeed as a professional, I believe that some of these experiences will resonate and they will pick up on the themes that are pertinent to the role of women in business and the role of women in leadership more broadly. As was stated in the intro, we are in an unprecedented global challenge. The post-COVID era calls for all hands on deck. All countries are challenged to rebuild. They are challenged to improve upon. They are challenged to challenge the world order that was and the world order that is emerging. And therefore, post-COVID has a particular urgency for women in leadership, for us to call, it's a call for service in our local communities and at a global level. As stated in the introduction, my first degree was a Bachelor of Science in telecom, and I started off in the telecommunications sector as an engineer. Having spent some time in that area, I then went ahead and did my MBA and gained further leadership experience, which is really what propelled me into the leadership space. Now, it's quite common that whenever there are senior leadership openings available, we are told there are no women who are suitably qualified. In fact, this is not a local issue. This is not an African issue. This is a global issue. Over and over again, you get the sense that, yes, we would like to appoint women, but where are they? However, we see our male counterparts being promoted in all sorts of areas with varying levels of skill. And sometimes we feel, surely we have been overlooked this one time. And it happens again, and it happens again. So when I was starting out, being equipped with my experience and my leadership skills, I decided to apply for a job that was a newly formed Botswana's investment promotion agency. Now, like all women or most women who apply for jobs, before I could even apply for that job, I had to make sure that I read, I studied, and I internalized what was required. Doing so to ensure that I was in the 90% percentile. I was in the space where I knew what I was presenting was exactly what was requested. However, the only thing that I could not tick was that I had not been a CEO. So this was the first opportunity to go for that position. So I was quite pleased. And when I was invited for the interview, a little overwhelmed, but still I felt, here's my opportunity, here's my break. Why don't I go for it? I thought the interview was going very well, actually, when suddenly a question was thrown my way. And the question was, would I consider the position of a deputy? I was stunned. I looked around. I didn't know what to do. I heard a little voice inside me saying, say yes, say yes. Because if you don't say yes, you might not get a job at all. But on the other hand, there was also another part of me saying, but you are being interviewed for the CEO. Where does this deputy position come from? However, at that point, somebody else on the panel, equally stunned, intervened and said, well, since we started this by interviewing for the CEO position, why don't we just complete that process first? Now that made a lot of sense to me. Anyway, after the appointment, I met the gentleman to whom I would have been deputizing. And by then I had established a good rapport with my chairman. I was therefore able to muster my most bold and unapologetic tone and said to him, "So this is the gentleman that I would have been deputizing." I didn't have to say anything further, neither did he, because they had not even interviewed this gentleman. At some point in the interview, one of the women leading the interview suddenly thought, yes, she's a woman, she would make a good deputy. And this other guy could be out there, could be a safer bet. And this is one of the challenges that I wanted to underscore as we look to choose to challenge. What are we doing in terms of the stereotype? What are we doing as women when we deal with other women? And what are we doing when we are looking at how we can make an impact in this world? Are we holding back because we now know that if we come for this interview, the likelihood of getting the job is not going to be wholly dependent on what we have to offer, but it is going to be dependent on all sorts of other issues, including preferring a candidate who has not even been tested or looked at in that regard. Further to this position, I decided to go further afield and join the Commonwealth as its Deputy Secretary General. When my term ended, I thought, oh wow, now not only do I have the 90% of the job that is required as having deputized for the Secretary General, surely I can go to the next level. I can bid for the Secretary General position. So in 2014, I was actually the first woman to put my name down for the top Commonwealth position. I lost the race to another woman who had also come through the process. It became clear somewhere down the line that one of us was going to get the job. But when I learned that it was I who had failed to attain my goal, I stumbled. The initial shock and disappointment over time paved way for a great opportunity of reflection. Yes, it's easy to camp at the what went wrong station. However, the key for me came even further down the track when asking the question, what could I have done differently? This last question really unleashed my potential. In taking ownership, in avoiding the inevitable fault finding and blame game, I claimed back my power. Yes, I did not have the power to go back and change the outcome of the election. However, I did have the power to move forward. And herein is a second area that I wanted to emphasize in this short presentation, to say as women, we have the power to move forward. And therefore, the challenge that we experience as women is often not winning, but it is in not running. In other words, a lot of us will be denied of positions of excellence, denied of opportunities that are beyond, simply because we choose not to run. Winning is the easy part. If we win as women, we deliver. We have seen again in COVID how women in leadership have stunned the world in terms of their management of the COVID crisis. Countries that were led by women, that are led by women, have in general have outperformed countries that are led by men. And they have done so by exercising the very elements of their femininity, if you will, that allowed them to say, here we have a crisis, and in our thinking, this is how we can respond to it. So the challenge is not what will women deliver if they win. The challenge is when we lose as women, when we fail to reach a goal, we are then very quick to go back into that self-doubt. We then experience that conflict between the head and the heart. Is it that we cannot really do it? This reaffirms what we were afraid of in the first instance. Am I good enough? Maybe I'm not that smart. Maybe I should have waited my turn. Maybe this was too ambitious. And whatever else we throw in our way. And that is part of the journey to leadership, the journey to serving, the journey to being the best that we can be is a journey that is not always a smooth journey, particularly for women. And therefore, it's a journey that we have to embark upon with resolve and determination to go after that which matters. Because when we do that, it is liberating. It can fuel our energy and our power, and it can allow us to take on board whatever challenges lay ahead. We should also recall that with power naturally comes responsibility, and that can be really scary. It means that we should be accountable for our own decisions, our own successes and failures. And owning failure is very, very difficult. And I speak a lot about failure because failure is a great learning opportunity. And if we as women are going to embark on the challenge of women in leadership, we need to know that the era of the first woman this, the first woman that, the first woman that is soon going to be over, we hope. We are now competing for maybe being the second or third woman in a position. And therefore, we know that it is quite possible to say you may still be overlooked, because if the first woman was appointed because the system felt that, oh, we need to have a woman in this position. In so many years, we've never had a woman lead this institution. Well, guess what? If the last woman who led the institution was 5 or 10 years ago, that is not something that is going to happen. And we may now also go back to where we started. We may start being overlooked because again, now we are saying, oh, no, we've had a woman in this place, so we better move on. So we should not camp at the station of the first woman in this area or the first woman in that area. We should camp at the station of, here we are in a post-COVID era. We need to have the best brains, we need to have the best energy, we need to have the best ideas that can support and sustain our communities and our environment in this world. A lot of women are resilient, and our resilience comes across, especially when we go in protection mode, whether we are protecting our family, protecting our children, protecting our boss. It is clear that women reinvest up to 90% of our income in education, nutrition, and in our communities. So when we are in the protection mode, and whether we are protecting and reinvesting to protect and sustain our communities, our children, we find that we have that resilience as women. So we should not be daunted by challenges and by failure that may come our way. Because when we now turn to protecting and reinvesting in ourselves, we have an opportunity to shine, to be the best that we can. And when we are the best that we can, we enable those around us to also shine and be the best that they can. And so I really wanted to keep my opening remarks very brief, because I know there are some very pertinent questions that have been are to be posed in the panel. And I would like to come back to some of the themes that I started on, but maybe do that in the context of the conversation so that other members of the panel can also contribute. I thank you very much for this early start to Wednesday and to the continuing celebration of the Women's Week and the Women's Month as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Masego. I am truly inspired, really. I'm lucky when I get to moderate panelists like this, because I get to listen and actually absorb very inspirational words which have come from you. And I'm truly in awe with what it is that you've managed to achieve. And I've been, making notes on the side, because this is going to go into my journal as well. I wanted to just pick on a couple of things that you've said. And, you said that in order for you to succeed, and when you were applying for your roles, you tried to make sure that you were in the 90% percentile, and you were really preparing yourself. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, do you think that women overinvest in workplace capabilities, and why do you think that that is?
Thank you so much for the feedback. I think one of the challenges that we have in women, and I call it like I don't know whether it's a code or a gene, there's something in us that talks about perfection. There's a high level of expectancy that is there whether we are expected to be the perfect mother, the perfect spouse, the perfect employee. And therefore, as women, we have somehow internalized this perfection gene. And that is why when we apply for jobs, we first have to convince ourselves that we are the perfect candidate, and then we can apply for the job. And that's something that really holds. I cited it as an example, not an example necessarily to be followed, because it does hold us back. And I was also citing it because even when you have gone through all that, you can still not get the job, because somebody then has the idea that, oh, there's another man in the wings that could come in and do the job and she can be the deputy. And at that stage, what it said to me is, yes, you have everything that we want, but maybe if we take you on as the deputy, we can still access that and give the job to the man. So it's a complicated thing, but I think it really does speak to the heart of the problem, that we overinvest, and because of that, it sometimes delays our progression. Because instead of applying for the job, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I better get another degree. Instead of applying for the job, I'm thinking maybe I better wait for another 5 years. And then you find some young bright shot coming up, and within 2-3 years, they've gone ahead and done what you've been contemplating all this time.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it's true. We do overcompensate. I mean, I think I'm similar to that, in that I have to constantly be saying, I'll go to Strathmore, I'll do this program, I'll do that program, and it'll help me. But fundamentally, I think that's because of our nature of perfection, and also making sure that we have all the chance that we can get to actually get that particular role, as opposed to knowing that we deserve it just because of our current qualifications, as opposed to over-perfecting. Throughout your journey, I mean, it's a really inspiring journey where you've taken some big steps, setting up Brand Botswana, and, things that are really, out of most people's comfort zone. Were you ever afraid in your journey?
I'm not sure if the word I would say is afraid. I think certainly I found that maybe I didn't even have the time, because I just felt that I was forever being scrutinized at every level. And therefore, I remember, for example, when I joined the Commonwealth, I would meet some people very early on when I started, and they would ask me, so where are you from? Tell us a little bit about yourself. So I start to talk and explain who I was and what I'd done. And then they would turn around and say, oh, now we see why you are the new Deputy Secretary General. So I felt like I was being interviewed so many times for the same position. I'd already got the position, but I just felt everybody I met was like, I'm gonna meet her and really try to figure out why her, so it is a sort of thing that sort of kept me on my toes, because I just simply said, and I would just smile because I knew it was coming. The minute I heard the question, okay, so tell us a little bit about where you come from, I knew, right, interview mode, here we go. But I think when I was doing initiatives like Brand Botswana, I was really driven by the quest for service and saying there's a gap. And sometimes when we come from developing countries, it can actually be an advantage because we don't have layers and layers of people doing various jobs. And therefore we have to, whatever needs to be done, needs to be done. And therefore it makes it a little bit easier to then say, well, okay, I'm head of investment promotion. I don't have a national brand with which to run to get my job done. So I would identify the areas of need And once I had identified the areas of need to serve the job that I was doing, then it was easier to get buy-in and to work with other people to get it delivered.
Fantastic. Final question to you before I invite the panelists for the Q&A session is, through your journey, is there anyone that you've admired the most in your journey, especially around choosing to challenge? Who is it that you admire, and who inspired you? Why did they inspire you?
You know, I always say, I answer that question like I'm a very naive person, because I answer the question by saying my mother and father. And I have traveled the world, I have met some great people, and I take it from there. But I just feel that the reason I come to my mother and father is the value that was instilled, and the piece of me that I feel I own and allows me to step out into the world. And that's what I hold on to dearly. And I just feel that as a parent, I challenge myself, can I do some of that for my children? I'm not sure I'm winning, but I know that definitely when I look at my parents, I think that they went through challenges, they went through strife, they emphasized the value of working hard and striving towards that which you believed in. And they also had a culture of service. So I think those are the real people that really set me on my path. And even in matters and times of challenge, that's my reservoir. That they're both not here, but they're with me all the time. So it's a reservoir that I still continue to draw from. Thank you.
That's lovely. I think your children have a great role model in you as well. So I'm sure they'll probably say the same thing when they're asked the question a couple of years from now. Thank you so much for those words of wisdom. I think everyone on this call is truly inspired. I can see Molly has been smiling, throughout this whole conversation, and I think we all just resonate with the words of advice that you've given us. So thank you so much. What I will do is now introduce the rest of the panel. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a fantastic set of panelists who will share their insights with us when it comes to choosing to challenge. And I will start off by introducing Molly. So Molly Regamba. Molly Regamba is a legal and private sector expert with over 20 years of experience in Rwanda. She is a managing partner at RR Associates and Advocates. She has a vast experience and knowledge in corporate and commercial law, has interfaced with government officials in Rwanda on key policy issues, advocated policy and legislative reforms as well. As a draftsperson, Molly has also worked on the development of privatization laws, labor laws, investment code, and other business laws. Really, really significant work that's contributed to the growth of Rwanda. So fantastic achievements right there. Molly is also experienced in coordinating capacity building programs, including the coordination of business development centers for SMEs, training programs in business management, and relevant business laws such as commercial law and international comparative law. She currently sits on a number of government boards representing the private sector. She was the vice chair of the Capital Markets Authority and the Student Financing Agency of Rwanda. She is currently the vice chairperson of the Rwanda Management Institute, a board member of Workforce Development Authority, and also a board member of BRITAM, Education Endowment Fund, NPD Kotrako, and KCB Rwanda. Significant achievements, Molly. I don't know how you do it. Truly admire your ability to run all of these hats at the same time. Molly has an undergraduate law degree from the National University of Rwanda and a master's in international comparative law from Uppsala University in Sweden. She's a member of the Rwanda Bar Association and the East African Law Society. She is also a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, London. Molly, welcome.
Thank you, Sima. Thank you very much for that kind introduction.
Fantastic. All right, our next panelist, and I'm really proud that the next panelist could actually sit on this panel and contribute to this conversation on an equal footing. And on that note, I'd like to invite Mr. Peter Dwati and introduce him. Mr. Dwati is a pioneer in Africa insurance. Peter Dwati was named East African Entrepreneur of the Year in 2013 in the CNBC Forbes All Africa Business Leaders Awards, which is one of the continent's, if anyone knows, one of the continent's most prestigious business awards. So fantastic achievement right there. With a master's degree holder in economics and insurance, Peter is a chartered insurer with over 28 years of experience in the East African insurance industry. He's the founder and CEO of Resolution Group Limited, a financial services company that owns insurance and credit business in the East African region. He was formerly the CEO of Metropolitan Health Group, a South African health insurance group, and was managing director of AAR Health Services in Tanzania. He's the founder and main shareholder of Centric Air Ambulance, chairman of the True Black Entertainment, anchor shareholder in TB Distributors, Live Eye Limited, Pine Creek Holdings, Sprint Distributions, and Brown Oak Investment Holdings. He was admitted as a global fellow in the African Leadership Institute, the Aspen Initiative, which is a collaborative effort of 7 partner organizations in Africa, and the US to foster values-based, action-oriented leadership in Africa. Wow, Peter, again, a whole impressive list of achievements, contribution to the corporate world as well. You have your hands in everything, truly admirable. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Sima. Thank you for the introduction.
All right. I would then like to introduce Dr. Gladwell Chiarier. Dr. Chiarier graduated with an MB-CHB, so that's a Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery degrees from the University of Nairobi, and went ahead to receive her postgraduate degree in internal medicine from the same institution. After receiving her undergraduate degrees, she did her internship at the Kenyatta National Hospital before proceeding to pursue her fellowship in medical oncology in London, England. She returned to Kenya, where she was one of the founding members of the oncology unit at the Aga Khan University Hospital, and was also part of the team that set up the first Kenyatta National Hospital Tumor Board in 2007. She then joined the University of Nairobi in the clinical medicine department as a senior lecturer. Soon afterwards, enrolled for a PhD program with the Barts Cancer Institute, and also recently received fellowship to the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh. She currently runs a private practice at the Nairobi Hospital and serves in the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Board since her appointment in 2015 to the regulatory department of the board. She's a member of the Kenya Society of Hematology and Oncology and is also a full member of the American Society of Clinical Oncology, as well as the European Society for Medical Oncology. She continues to be an advocate for early diagnosis of cancer and is greatly involved in programs that focus on providing easy access to basic screening services to the underprivileged, including setting up oncology services at county level. In recognition for this, she won the Union for International Cancer Control in 2014 for screening in poor settings. Now, for me, it's really nice that we have somebody from a different field as well. You know, a typical field where, from my perspective, it's really quite saturated with men. And so we're also proud to have you, Dr. Chiarier, on this panel. And you know, I'm looking forward to hearing what you've managed to achieve in your field, and clearly quite a lot based on the introduction that I've just shared. Welcome, Dr. Chiarier. Dr. Chiarier, you're muted. You're muted. You just need to unmute.
Thank you, Sima.
Welcome. Welcome. All right, so we have the 4 panelists here with us. I've already introduced Ambassador Masakoa, and what I'm going to do is just ask some questions to the different panelists to get your insights. I would like to encourage all of you who are listening to us out there. There is a Q&A tab at the bottom. Please feel free to go in there and post any questions that you'd like to hear responses from the panelists as well. And then I guess the first question is really quite a broad question, and I'd ask all the panelists to kind of respond to this. And I'd like to start off with Peter, because I think it'll just be interesting to hear what you have to say on the theme for International Women's Day. The theme is Choose to Challenge. And the question really here to you is, what does Choose to Challenge mean to you as Peter? And how is it that you feel that men should respond to this theme?
Wow, you had to put me out fast. So yeah, so I knew this question was coming. You know, our view of gender and roles that define us are formed as when we're kids, and over time as you grow up, the media and how you engaged at the playground, your parents, they instill some kind of structures. Now, as men and African men, our culture forces us to act in a particular way towards women, and this is built by how you grow up. It's where, as a single father of three girls, that my mind was formed about 10, 15 years ago to how deliberate as a man I need to be to ensure that women enjoy the world fairly or equally. And then also to understand how my mind was formed around privilege. Now, over the years, as I've gone into entrepreneurship, and I don't think I was actually being deliberate, but I just found that my leadership in the businesses that I run is dominated by women. Out of the 8 assets that I run, 6 of them, the CEO are women. But over time, it occurred to me that not deliberately, that I was challenging the stereotypes that have been formed in my upbringing. So when I think about this theme is, for us as men, we have to consider it deliberately in how we act around the women around us, be our mothers, our children, but mostly about people who report to us, who we expect to give particular outcomes in the business world and in leadership spaces and in social spaces. So the choose to challenge, the word choice, I think is what defines that you have to be deliberate at all times to challenge those norms, to challenge culture, to challenge your own biases in how you choose to engage in women in leadership, especially.
Fantastic. I like that. I like that we have a choice, actually, and really need to be deliberate in that. I also like the fact that you're being deliberate because you have 3 girls. I think that's really quite important. And maybe just picking up on that, what are your career aspirations for your 3 girls themselves?
Okay, so my girls are now adults, and maybe I'd give a tale. When the kids were growing up, I had made decisions of what I want them to do. And I was challenged once when my oldest daughter, who was in Strathmore, dropped out of a statistics course to pursue sound engineering. And she eventually graduated as sound engineer in South Africa. That was tough for me, because I work in the entertainment space. I employ sound engineers. I couldn't see how my daughter was going to be one of those people handling cables and managing sound in concerts. She's done it well. But it took time for me to be defined. I think as a father after my wife passed on, I realized that you cannot force kids first to be what they don't want to be. Not like our generation. When I was going to uni in the 80s, the choice of degree was done by my parents. Now it's a bit different. And my second daughter is an architect. Again, she made her own choices. My youngest, who is just gone to uni now, has decided to go into business, again out of her own volition. But I was taught by the first daughter, do not put a girl into a label or into a box. But even I, who I find myself quite a bit woke, I find myself getting challenged daily.
But I'm glad that you are aware of it. And I think that's the first step, really, is creating that awareness that, you need to make sure you're creating an equal platform. And I really admire the fact that you've let her go into sound engineering. It's quite incredible. And I wish, people that are listening out there really take example from you. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks
Molly,
so much.
if I come back to you, what do you think? What does Choose to Challenge mean? What are some of the common misconceptions when it comes to women in leadership? What would you say to that?
Thank you, Sima. Listening to the keynote speaker and Mr. Dwati, I think already that question is answered. The challenges that are out there, and what we need to do to challenge the status quo. So maybe just to unpack that question a little bit. I like to work. I'm a lawyer by profession, but I love to work with statistics. So when you look, the other day I was listening to Julia, the former Prime Minister of Australia, and Dr. Ngozi. They authored a book, Women and Leadership. And they're very interesting statistics they were putting out there. And some of the statistics will actually tell you where we stand as women and why we should choose to challenge. So, for example, less than 70% of women, less than 77% of Fortune 500 companies are women. And you come to ask yourself, is it because we don't have talent out there, or is it because, just like Mr. Dwati has said, women are boxed in a certain cocoon, yeah? And then also you look at other interesting statistics. For example, for every $1 a man earns, a woman earns 63 cents. Why is that? Another interesting statistics, out of the top 100 sports celebrities, only one lady appears on that list, that is Serena Williams, and she's number 63. Today, let's look at today. Recently, I was watching news, and Melinda Gates was indicating how women are the worst hit by COVID. 47 million women across the globe are going into poverty because of COVID. Now, when you look at all these challenges, there's a reason why that is happening to women. And why is that? It's because there's this unbiased, unconscious bias, there's stereotyping. So choosing to challenge is to actually challenge that status quo and say, look, enough is enough. Fortunately, I come from a country where women have really been given a platform. Rwanda, when you look at these statistics, actually in Rwanda, they almost don't apply other than the private sector. So in our parliament, more than 50%, more than 60% actually are women. Cabinet, more than 50%. But you go to the private sector, and you can count the number of CEOs, you can count the number of business leaders. So again, even though government has given us a platform, but there's also this unconscious bias or stereotyping that actually doesn't allow women to be elevated. So choosing to challenge is, I believe, is to challenge that status quo.
Absolutely, it really is. And those statistics are quite alarming. I actually didn't realize that we had that 7% of women on Fortune companies. Really, that's really quite alarming. One of the other statistics that I had in terms of literacy, like for literacy, when it comes to Africa, 87% of men are literate, 77% of females are literate. But on the other hand, I also did some interesting kind of analysis for leadership, percentage of women in senior management and leadership by continents. And I'm actually quite proud of Africa, because I've just seen that Africa has 38% of women in senior management, whereas North America has 29. And so I know it's not equal there, but it is really something that we seem to be actively gunning towards. And I think that consciousness, awareness about where we need to go, where we need to be, really will get us there at the end. And also Serena Williams being the only lady celebrity from a sports perspective, I'm actually quite in shock, because there are very many females who are really going out there and performing incredibly well. So when it comes to unconscious bias, I just want to unpack this unconscious bias and stereotypes, and maybe come to you, Dr. Chiarier, especially within your field. What are some of the unconscious biases or stereotypes when it comes to medicine? and how men and women are treated differently in the medical world. What would you say?
Thank you, Sima, because, and I think it's a really awesome theme this year, choose to challenge these unconscious biases, because we have to stand up to them to be able to make a change. Now, in my career, and it's basically a male-dominated field, both as a physician, as a doctor, as a physician, and an oncologist. And these biases are rampant. And you ask me the reasons why this happens, and it's multifactorial. Some of the causes are because of women ourselves, and majority of the times because of what men think of us and think where we should be, not because we are not capable. And I think, I started medical school in a class of 110 students in an undergraduate first year, and we were 11 girls. And we were assigned dissection tables where we were to dissect a cadaver. A cadaver is a dead body that has been preserved that you're going to study for a few years in the class of anatomy. And we were all petrified. I mean, most of us had not seen a real dead body. But I remember standing up and, we stood there 10 minutes, not sure who will open the body first. And I stepped up, cut open the tape and told them, let's get on with it. And so, there are many reasons, including upbringing. I was brought up by teachers who never gave me the idea that I was any less than men. In fact, it came to a surprise to me that there are inequality or stereotypes that, discriminative things that actually exist. So, the failure to stand up, to negotiate our space, we are usually referred to as aggressive when we assert ourselves and ask like any other man, to be put on the same platform. Women lack confidence. We are risk adverse. What the ambassador has said, we fear failure. And, unless you take risks and you become really sure that you're up to the task, because you're talented, you're educated, you've been mentored, you have role models, you can do it. And most importantly is the failure to put in the requisite hours at work, because people have this stereotyping that women should take care of your children. It's true, be a wife, it's true, but we equally can be able to put in time to be the very best that we can and compete in the same platform. We are not asking for tokens or tidbits because you're a woman and therefore you should be employed on less because you're female. And therefore we should really not be put to choose the less demanding, the lower stature, the less career enhancing roles just because we cannot be able to sort of demand at the same platform. So I've really sort of concentrated on the things that we can change, and that is ourselves that we can change. We have to realize that it's our fight for our life. I work in oncology, where there is a lot of cancer treatment and care, a lot of terminal patients where there is a lot of truths about life and death. And therefore, when you look back at this, what we're talking about, choose to challenge, it really falls down to really, it's a fight for life, because some of these decisions that you challenge really outline how not only your career is going to be, the sort of role model you shall be, the power or lack of it, in your life, and, bringing out your best self. And when I talk about your best self, just like in the parable of the talents, if you're good at little things, you'll be given more things. So we work to be better and to be best, not only for ourselves, but for the greater good. Like in the medical world, as you're competing in the same level of men, don't aspire to be less, be greater, work harder, put in more, because you can. And not only for yourself, but for the greater good. We are given talents so that we can also bless others, not only for our own good. We need to have that aspect of service as well, to mankind. So, we really need to also not only ask for, to be considered, like Molly was saying, the government says, okay, 50% of people or ministers should be women. But I really think that those women should be deserving to make a difference, because if we are put in those roles and we are not really competent, really at the end of the day, when an analysis is done, they'll say, what we were saying about choosing the second and third women, these women who are chosen because they were less actually never made any difference. So as we are fighting these stereotypes and inequalities, I think we should also strive to make sure that we're as good as the next man. And sometimes that involves negotiating. I remember, when I went to London and we were going to rotate in radiotherapy, I was very shocked when one of the ladies put up her hand and said, I can't do radiotherapy and chemotherapy at the moment because I'm pregnant. I would like to be rotated so that I can do this after 3 or 4 months. And then I thought to myself, how can she speak about her pregnancy in front of a whole department? But you see, that doesn't make her less an oncologist or less a senior registrar in the department. She negotiated and she sought support, and that's, what men do. They network, they seek support, they ask as wives and their mothers to be able to support them so that they become the very best in their field. And I think those are some of the things that women should be empowered to do. When I went to train in England, I was younger than many of the registrars and the whites I was working with. I was female, I was Black, but even worse, I was African. And there are very silent stereotypes that exist, especially among, careers like medicine. They won't speak out openly and call you this and that or think that you're less. But sometimes, our skills and so on make us rise. So we do what we call bone marrow aspirates, where we remove samples from the bone marrow at the back in oncology to see if there is any cancer that remains. And you see, I had done so many in Kenyatta National Hospital that I could do them very quickly and painlessly for the patient. So this cohort of white people discovered, when we have our bone marrow every 3 months, if you go to Dr. Chiarier's queue, she's going to do it in half a minute and you'll be through and it will be less painful. And you see, it didn't matter to them whether I was Black or white or young. All that mattered is I effectively did a bone marrow for them quickly, and they had to come for another one in 6 months. And therefore, so we should nurture our talents also to be as good as we are actually demanding. We should seek leverage even in these marriages we are in, because it's really a partnership. The same way we support our husbands, the same way we nurture our children, we should also demand the same support from these partnerships that we're in, because we truly deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. I think you've said a couple of very powerful things. And, one of the things that really struck me is just stating, I am pregnant, and therefore can I have a rotation for 3 months? And, just being as matter of fact about it as possible, because I think that's where we really need to get to, is to accept that being pregnant is a fact, and it's a fact of life, and it should not prevent you from doing anything. It's just something that you must do. And like you said, men also negotiate aspects based on whatever it is that they're going through. And I think we really need to get to that stage of confidence where we can stand up and say, yes, I am, and therefore I would like to request this. And more importantly, also make sure that the employer of today is very cognizant to create a platform where those kind of things are normal. There's no biases at all when it comes to that. We have catered for those aspects of life that really need to be catered for as we move forward. And through that, now we'll start seeing the world changing a little bit, because it's normalizing that situation as opposed to creating a misconception on it. I also wanted to pick on something else that you spoke about, which is parenting. And maybe coming to Ambassador Masikoa, you have 3 children. In your household, is it truly shared parenting? or are you the key or the primary caregiver for your children? And what do you think is the role of shared parenting when it comes to choosing to challenge the norm? Is it one of those norms that we must choose to challenge?
Okay. Oh, this is directed to me. Well, I think that I would like to believe that I'm the primary caregiver in the home, and I attribute several factors to it. I think first of all, it's part of the environment that I grew up in. For example, I had twins. My two girls are twins, and we used to have a challenge around, how to take care of them. There's just one of you and there's two of them, and so on. But it was because the society put the pressure on me. Yes, my husband would help out, but he would see his role as helping out, as opposed to, we have to both go in there. So if I didn't say, oh, I need help, can you pitch in, can you do whatever, then it kind of like left it. So I find the society, even when you do have a willing partner who would like to co-parent, sometimes I feel that even as we are parents, we as women, we sometimes keep the men out of the situation, because we feel we are protecting them and we are taking care of the child, and that's our responsibility. So yes, I think that it comes back to this expectancy that we have, that our culture also imposes on us. And that's one thing that we do have to challenge, because if you have to get up in the morning to go to work, to provide for the very children that you're taking care of, then you need a good night's rest. And if you are not feeding the child, then it should not necessarily be you who is getting up to tend to the children. So it was an interesting time, but I did also reflect on it, and I said, how much of this is it just that it's not that I necessarily do not have an unwilling partner, but it's just that I feel it's my responsibility. So I'm the first one to rush out there. When I hear a cry, I don't even wait to see if anybody else is reaching out. I was the first one to go out there to reach out. So these are some of, and I also agree with the doctor that some of the challenge, as we choose to challenge, is really starting with us. And so if we also challenge ourselves and challenging the stories and the orientation that we have had in terms of our role in the home, our role in society. Yes, it made a lot of sense when we were stuck at home the whole day, that you would be the one that is carrying 90% of the load. But if you are both going to work in the morning, then surely, as she also said, that opportunity to negotiate, challenge and negotiate your space to say, listen, we're both getting up in the morning. How are we going to handle this? Because it is a situation that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Molly, if I just come to you with the same question, what are your thoughts when it comes to shared parenting as well? And where is the place of shared parenting in this fight that we're having, and the choice to challenge? What do we need to challenge, and how can we actually really, in addition to what has been said in terms of helping ourselves and putting it out there, how can we actually really change that aspect from a cultural and societal perspective? How do we change that norm that a woman's place is not only to stay at home and to look after children, but now women are in leadership, are working, are employed, and are literally on the same grounds as the partner. So what advice would you have for us?
Thank you, Sima. There's a part of me probably that I didn't include in my profile that I need to make clear. So I'm a mother of 3, but divorced. And so I've almost single-handedly raised these children. And maybe one thing that I can say is that there's this stereotype that as a woman alone, it's difficult to to navigate parenthood plus plus work, plus business, etc. But I think I'm a very good example of that. I've managed to raise 3 children, run a business. Prior to that, of course, working. And of course, you've seen the various boards that I sit on. And it's doable. It's doable, but it's a mindset issue. It begins with you. It begins with how you set your mind. If you feel you can do it as a woman, you'll definitely do it. And of course, for me, in all this, what has helped me is where there are 2 people, I've actually hustled it almost alone. And because of that, I've created a support system, some kind of structure, yeah? Made sure that I have, for example, a good personal assistant, where I can't pick and drop children from school. Fortunately, mine are now old. One is at university, another one joining university soon, and another young one. So you make sure that you have a clear support system that helps you to navigate through this. And of course, apportioning time depending on priorities that you have. So as a woman, you can actually do it, but it begins with, of course, challenging yourself. I think it's Dr. Masekwa that has just indicated that you begin by challenging yourself and saying, look, I'm faced with this, how do I navigate through it? And if you are set to navigate through it, because women are good managers. So if you can manage a home, run an office, run a business, I believe that is something that is doable. I don't know if I've answered your question.
You have, absolutely, and totally inspired me that you've managed to achieve what you have single-handedly. So, you know, that's really brilliant. And it just kind of speaks to this whole strive for perfection that women have, and the ability to just take on more in the pursuit of excellence, in the pursuit of, you know, caring, and in the pursuit of just humanity and driving us forward. And I think that kind of natural instinct really differentiates our ability to move on. And I think also, you know, Ambassador Masegoa said, is that, you know, we just need to also have the ability to just move on. And I think that that's really what you've demonstrated. You've gone through an event in your life, and you've decided to move on and achieved what you've had despite the various challenges that come with it. Maybe one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, Molly, is, in your career specifically, are there any points in time where you have been challenged when it comes to being a leader? You know, you sit on various boards. I'm sure that there are maybe some imbalances when it comes to the boards, in as much as, you know, there is a 50% requirement and so forth. What kind of challenges have you faced specifically, and what advice would you give based on those challenges?
Thank you, Sima. The challenges are many in all leadership, in all the various leadership roles. Of course, I've talked about the unconscious biases, the stereotypes. For example, if a woman, I'll begin with myself. Ambition for a woman comes with a negative connotation. When a man is ambitious, that's a good thing. When a woman is ambitious, then you're considered to be, you know, this, you know, I don't know how I can explain it, but it comes with a negative connotation. And I've been in situations where, of course, so far I would say I can compete almost on the same level with women, with men in my field, but in leadership, there are those unconscious biases that we also always have at the back of our minds. So if it comes to taking a tough decision, sending tough messages, as a woman, that is you're considered ruthless or complicated, or, you know, but if it's a man that does that, it's received well. I've been in situations where, as a woman, I've given the same message exactly as a man. And for a man, it's almost received, it's okay. But for a woman, it's like, really, can you do that? Can you say that? So these things happen in boardrooms, in all the leadership roles that I've had. And now it's up to you to begin balancing your toughness and empathy. I remember in a particular situation where things were really going wrong, and I had to call out things as they are, because it had gotten to a level where a tough message needed to be given. And one other colleague looked at me and was like, "Molly, do you have empathy?" So I was trained, for me to think through something, I make someone repeat a question. So it almost sounded like stupid. I was like, so what is empathy? So while I process, what do I respond to them? You know. So what I'm trying to indicate here is that as a woman, when you give a tough message, or when you make a tough decision, you're stereotyped as this tough woman, complicated, and yet for a man, in most times, it's okay. So whether it's in boardrooms, whether it's in other roles, leadership roles that I've had, I've met some of these challenges. But again, as a woman, knowing the culture or the society that we live in, sometimes it's also important to balance that toughness and empathy and build a middle ground, because it's like you're not allowed to go to any extreme of those. If you're so empathetic, you'll be considered very soft. When you're so tough, you'll be considered ruthless. So I've always tried to find a middle place, but I've also told myself, look, if I have to send a tough message at sometimes, I'll have to do it. But again, you've seen all the women that have gone through this. I remember when I was watching Hillary Clinton campaigning for the presidency. You know, people kept on commenting about her attitude as a tough person, other than looking at the substance that she had to, you know. And then when you look at her counterpart, you're like, really? So those are some of the challenges that I think most women will tell you they've faced in leadership roles. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. We actually have a question for Peter on the Q&A, but just before I lose the thought, I just want to go back to Ambassador Masako and ask, you know, just picking on the what you just said around emotion. You know, it's like you can never win. Either you're told that you're too soft, or you're told that you're too harsh and you have no empathy or emotion. The question I wanted to ask you, Ambassador Masako, is, where is the place of emotion in leadership? I mean, how can we, we've been judged as being emotional on either end of the scale. So do you think that it is a bad thing? Is it a weakness for us to have emotion? What is the place of emotion in leadership?
Thank you very much for the question. No, I think that emotion is very important, and I think that it is actually a strength for us women in a lot of cases. I think, as Molly says, we are judged. We do have this expectancy that is put on us, and therefore, for us to be able to perform and deliver, and in areas such as in medicine, in the law, in the science, and in other technical fields, we have to be able to demonstrate our competence to be able to be accepted in that space. But I just feel that we should allow ourselves to express our emotion. And this is why I remember when I was at business school, there was this debate and there was this young lady and a gentleman arguing this point and saying, you know, you women, you cry, you do all these things, you become emotional. And she said, well, you don't see us thumping the wall and throwing things at in other words, there are male characteristics of dealing with stress and dealing with difficult situations. And because the playbook for leadership, the playbook for how to, what is acceptable behavior has not been written by us. It's been written by men. So when they when they express their emotions in ways that they do, then it's a little bit more acceptable. And when women cry, or women, and I'm not saying all women cry, but when we express our emotions the way that we feel most comfortable, then they don't feel comfortable dealing with that. And they don't ever stop to think that it's also not comfortable for us women to see somebody banging the wall with their hand. The first thing is like, hey, you're gonna hurt yourself. And yet that could be their way of expressing the frustration. So I think it's a journey that we are on, and ultimately we may come to a common understanding and a common acceptance, but we cannot be men and we cannot be male in our orientation. And in order to fit in, it doesn't mean we have to deny who we are. We have to just create that space that allows us to be there and allows us to be ourselves in that space. But I totally agree with Molly that these stereotypes, we cannot pretend they're not there. If you go into a boardroom, and this is where earlier on I spoke about perfection. We are not trying to be perfect because we believe we should, but a lot of the times it's because that's what's going to get us into the room. If we are not projecting a certain image, a certain level of competence, a certain appreciation, then we are not even given that opportunity to sit around the table. So once we sit around the table, we can start the negotiation process and say, guys, this doesn't work for me. And I think as she was talking about Hillary Clinton, I remember Margaret Thatcher talking about when she went into cabinet, that all the meetings were held at ridiculous hours. And she said to them, I can't, we've got to renegotiate what time these meetings are held so that I can attend and I can do the things that I need to do. So yes, that negotiation space that Dr. Chiarier spoke about, we have to create, but the first step is getting the seat at the table. And once we are there, that's where our opportunity to challenge. If we challenge from outside, we will not get there to begin with. So once we are in there, the scope to challenge becomes even bigger and even more important for the women that are there to challenge, so that it can open even bigger spaces for the ones that are still to come.
Thank you for that response. I wanted to then take that to Peter and said, Peter, have you ever been thumping walls? And what do you think of the whole emotional aspect in terms of how women are perceived? How would you respond to that?
Wow, okay. So we're not living in medieval times where leadership was command and don't care. So throughout history, we have been told that women are too kind and caring to be leaders. But the notion that someone is not kind and caring can lead effectively is at odds with reality. Now, today's leadership demands that leaders establish an emotional connection with their followers. Mm-hmm. And it's the only way you can do it, unless you automate everything and we are led by robots. Human beings crave validation, appreciation, and empathy. And I think men have a lot to learn how to do this by effectively watching women and emulating them. Today, if you look at the jobs of the future, there are those that demand that issue of creativity. And I want to remove the issue emotion and focus more on empathy. Using feedback and direction to help people grow, being less transactional and more strategic in relationships. Because to unlock people's thoughts, you have to connect with them. So the days of command and control are gone, and women, yes, are able to be more empathetic. So I just find that issue of us men using the issue that being emotional means weak. It's something that we need to get out of. I may say something that maybe sound a bit controversial. I actually think the underrepresentation of women in leadership, it's not because females are not competent. It's just that We have too few obstacles for incompetent males. Seriously, that a man doesn't get called out for being overconfident, incompetent in how they act, that a woman gets judged by things like emotion, which is actually what we require right now in today's leadership. Controversy ends there.
I think those are really powerful words. Actually, we don't call men out enough. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to choose to challenge, that men should be called out based on various issues. And you're right. I think emotion is necessary in leadership. It can be very, very powerful. We should not be changing, like Ambassador said, that we should not be changing who we are just because of that stereotype. There's a question, Peter, that has come through from the audience, which specifically asks on those who are moms of boys. How do we ensure that we don't ignore or undermine the boy child? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, so directly in my early, I have a program that I do on the boy child. So African governments, and I'll talk more about the Kenyan ones, 70s and 80s worked deliberately on programs around the girl child. We had Take Your Girl Child to School. We had women mentorship sessions in high school and in colleges that did not exist for men. And for a phase there, because of all these programs, including in the cultural setting where your aunties would sit with girls and guide them on how to behave as ladies and how to take control in particular situation, we never had anything for the boy child. So a balance is called that. So these days, the boy is grappling on that balance, especially if you have a cultural setting where what you've grown up seeing is a strong father, subservient mother, and you take that as the natural setting of leadership. Then you come to the business world and then you face and you find the leader in your space is a woman and unable to balance the two. It all comes through that issue of not appreciating what role we should play as a man in that kind of situation. So we also need to be careful so we don't lose the boy child. But not losing the boy child doesn't mean that we go and inculcate those biases that have been there traditionally. It means teaching them, for example, the issue that I've spoken about. Being empathetic doesn't mean you're weak. I remember the playground when I was growing up as a kid, where if a boy got injured and cried, they were told to man up, and you don't understand what that manning up means. So you come out thinking that manning up is maybe being aggressive. You find that misogyny comes from those kind of settings. Whilst we are raising up, elevating our women, we should also elevate the boy child and not look at them as we need to ignore the boy child. You see, if you go to social media in recent times, we are creating aggressive men by especially not inculcating this issue and making feminism become almost an enemy. That if a woman is advocating for equal rights, they are an enemy of men. So I do agree with the person who has asked this question, and though they're anonymous, that yes, we need to be careful not to ignore and undermine the boy child. But that doesn't mean, again, that that we should ignore the underrepresentation of women in all facets.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. I do notice a significant difference, especially with my 14-year-old. I have two girls, 14 and 11. And I do notice that there is a lot more awareness, and especially within the private school system, around balance, what is important, how can we create a more balanced world? Things like, even things like man up. If you do say man up, I know my daughter will automatically say, hey, what do you mean by that? And so I do know that within the public schooling, private schooling system, there is a real strong focus on making sure that there is an equal world that exists, and those stereotypes, norms, the things that you say are really frowned upon. And I don't know to what extent within the public schooling system that we can actually get that whole education going, because really that's where change will happen. And so you're right, education is required both within schooling systems and also, you know, at the parental level where maybe those cultural norms haven't had a chance to change. So thank you for your response to that. Dr. Chiarier, I wanted to come to you to just touch on something that Ambassador spoke about in her keynote speech, which is around discrimination by women. And I wanted to ask you this: what can women do to support women more? I mean, do you think that it has been happening enough? How can we support one another to succeed? Dr. Chiarier, are you there?
Sorry, I was still muted. Thank you, Seema, for that very important question. I was listening to what Mr. Dwati was speaking about. I have 3 sons, and basically the creation of, you know, that balance in creating sensitivity and strength. And now to, you know, to make them sensitive but strong individuals, and, you know, to do the same to ourselves. Now, as Ambassador highlighted, one of the very interesting things that I've found is that as women aspire to be greater and to leave a mark, sometimes we are our own worst enemies. We are the people who don't support each other, and probably in our power or leadership roles, we don't create those sort of lacunas which others can be able to capitalize on and make a way ahead. Now, we should, you know, because we've been gifted or not gifted, we've worked our way and gotten to the roles that we have, we actually should be very purposeful in creating sort of mentorship, or I would go even ahead and call it sponsorship of other younger women so that they can have the same platforms or advantages that we had. Because we too were mentored, we too were offered opportunities, we too should offer other opportunities and sort of throw the rung ladder for them to be able to climb up. Now, one of the first ladies, I served in the medical board, that's the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Board, which is a regulatory body for doctors. And the first chairman of the medical board, the first lady chairman, you know, you would go into a meeting with her. And for example, what we've been talking about, strength and sensitivity and emotion, is sometimes it just takes a word from somebody who's been there, done that, and encountered some of the problems and prejudices and stereotypes that we're talking about, to offer you a lifeline, like they say. And I remember in one of the meetings, she said, you know, Gladwell, you can be emotional. And she reminded me that President Kaunda was always emotional with a handkerchief, and no one ever thought less of him. You can be emotional, but remember to be completely calm and unapologetic about your emotion. And with those words she told me, I always remember when I go into an ICU to talk to a family about a relative that is dying, is that even if I break into tears about the patient I've been looking after, I should be completely calm about it, completely unapologetic as part of, you know, this is a groove. I'm sensitive, I'm feeling you, but in the same line, I am totally strong in what I'm doing and very efficient and capable, so that people don't read to the fact that you pulled out a handkerchief, that you're not taking care of the patient very well. So sometimes just a word to somebody who is much younger than us, because we've been there and done that. And I also think when I talk about mentorship, like at the university, we are given students to mentor. And that's where in our discussion, this issue of balance has come up. The same way we want to have no stereotypes, gender stereotypes for women, we should not create the same for men. We should be totally fair to be remembered well. So the same fairness, you know, to boys and girls. I look at the university today. In our class, there are more ladies, you know, there are more girls than boys. I feel very happy about that. And it's just to teach these girls to be assertive, but not aggressive. And, to sort of offer them the same mentorship that we were offered, but I'd go a step ahead and say, offer them even sponsorship. For example, a student is looking for financing, sponsorship is not in the, negative connotation. Sponsorship is openly support ladies. Say, I'm looking out to mentor you, to support you, to look for financing for you so that you do your project well, to network you, to be able to give you a chance because I think you can do it. Because some of the things that maybe not be very obvious, there are very many things pulling women down, not offering them those networks to be able to make it. So praise, recognize women who are doing exemplary service to mankind. And this praise should be totally independent of men, as Molly has said. The fact that you're a great woman, a great leader, has nothing to do with the fact that you have a great husband, or if you're Kamala Harris, it is totally independent of the fact that you're vice president to Biden. You can be great in your own space. So offer them this praise, recognize them, sponsor them, mentor them, create certain roles that are for women. For example, if you have a gender sensitive role, I chair the Division of Medicine in Nairobi Hospital, and unapologetically, the issues that are sort of gender sensitive to do with nurses and other employees in the hospital, give those to women. Offer this, because just like we talk about rape cases and policemen, for example, have these roles for people who can understand the sensitivities. Let us give ourselves the responsibility to understand others and to offer a footing, an extra, landing, soft landing, especially for ladies, even as we set very high standards. I'm not saying anything less, but I think a lot more can be done for ourselves, by ourselves.
Those are very powerful words. Thank you so much, Dr. Chiarier. I think, you're right. We have so much to offer, and we really should be going out there and supporting women. We should be praising, recognizing, sponsoring, mentoring, creating roles and being unapologetic in those situations. And that's exactly what you've said. So really powerful. We have a great role to play as women for women. There's another question that's come in for Molly on the chat. Molly, have the gender quotas in cabinet and parliament in Rwanda challenged bias and stereotypes positively, or are they seen as a form of tokenism to be tolerated at most? Have attitudes changed for the better, and does equality manifest at the domestic front as well?
Thank you, Sima. That is a good question, because I remember when there was this kind of implicit mandatory quota for women, whether it's in parliament, in cabinet, in corporates. There was this, again, another stereotype, say, okay, probably those women are there because they are ticking the boxes. So we ended up being some sort of box takers. But one thing that I can also indicate is that with time, women have proven themselves. Yeah, as much as they were viewed as box tickers at the very beginning, but they've also shown that they're actually competent. We have a president who is a strong advocate of gender equality, and this has actually cascaded down. So that gender equality is felt at the lower echelons at every level. And of course, women with time have begun getting this confidence, especially the young women. This has built confidence in the young women. They're like, okay, if so-and-so can actually do it, then I can do it. So the quotas have, with time, have actually had a very positive impact, especially on the younger women that are coming up. You look at young women in their 20s, early 30s, really managing well. One of the examples that I usually give is we have a very young lady minister of ICT. you would call that a glass cliff. If you're familiar with that terminology, they used to talk about glass ceilings, but today they talk about glass cliffs, where businesses that are complicated but are actually run by women and they navigate through. So she's really done a very good job in her role. So there's several women that have actually come up because of this, because the government has made it intentional that women have to occupy a certain percentage in all the various sectors, whether it's in private sector, whether it's in parliament, cabinet. So I can say at the very beginning, it looked like ticking the box, but with time, it has actually yielded great results. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And Peter, if I could just ask you this, definitely in Rwanda, there is a president who is driving change with respect to equality. When it comes to Kenya, do you think that the measures that were introduced at constitutional level are actually ticking a box, or have you seen a level of effectiveness come out at the national level as a result of some of those?
Sadly, no. I think the constitution was well intended, but the execution of it is still encumbered by those traditions. And yeah, I reckon that the intention is just to tick a box. Especially the voters, have to take that seriously to ensure that the constitution is done in full. And you can also see in the corporate environment, I don't see the deliberate, or at least in very few leadership do I see deliberate move to sort out that underrepresentation. The political space is endemic with misogyny and men not giving women an opportunity.
You're right, and I think we really need to start at that level. For serious change, really, it has to be at a national level first. In order for us to make some real significant change. So you're right. There's some things that we really need to learn from the leadership in Rwanda. I think some of those deliberate and intentional actions, which are then followed through, whether it be to tick a box at the start, eventually become cultural. And I think just having that deliberate focus will change us and really drive real change. So yeah, we have a long way to go. So then another question is to you, Peter, that has also come in through the chat, is how can girls rise above the challenges of life currently when men are behaving wildly to ruin their lives? I don't know how you want to respond to that.
Wow. For the first time, I'm dumbfounded by not having an answer to that. I really don't think I can be able to respond to that question effectively. There are a lot of cases, especially with what I see on social media, that even as a man, if I come out to defend them, you're called, there's a new colloquial term called a simp. I know that you guys have heard of it, where a man is being if you're being sympathetic to women's issues, women's rights, you're called other names that weakens your gender. I don't know. I'm not sure I have an answer to that. And I'd like you to throw that to the rest of the panel.
Okay, I think it could be, also maybe a little stereotypical from a perspective of men who are behaving wildly to ruin their lives, and maybe it comes off of social media and the stories that you hear. And maybe Dr. Chiarier, you could help us with some form of response. How can girls rise above the challenges of life? I think the comparison to men behaving wildly to ruin their lives is maybe there for just comparison. But what kind of advice would you give to the girls of today to rise above the challenges of life? Dr. Chiarier, you're muted.
Sorry, Sima, just go back a little bit. Is you're asking how should girls arm themselves?
Yeah, so the question actually reads, how can girls rise above the challenges of life currently when men are behaving wildly to ruin their lives? I think that the contention here was men are behaving wildly to ruin their lives. But maybe if we just focus on how girls can rise above challenges of life currently, what advice would you give to girls?
Thank you, Seema. Now, the ambassador alluded to this a little while earlier, that for us to get to sit at the table, unfortunately, our standards have to be higher. Molly also alluded to it. You're judged more harshly. Socially, you know, in all aspects of life. And therefore, you have to pull up your socks and to be a little better than the next man to be able to be allowed through the door to sit at the table. So what I tell my female students, what I tell some of the young consultants that I mentor, is that we sort of have higher aspirations in a social perspective, in what is perceived of us, as much as I talked about being unapologetic about what we mean to do, is that we really do have a social and ethical responsibility also to be totally above par. So talking about, you know, behaving wildly, I tell, you know, female students, you know, you can't go out and drink and be as crazy as, you know, you want to be, and then think that you're going to be as good as the next person. I try and steer away from comparisons to say, you can't drink as much as boys and be better than them. But talking about the social aspect, I tell you, women across the board, and many people have alluded to this, are judged more harshly. We talked about being emotional and, you know, sort of being tough. Molly has alluded to being tough. And then you'll hear comments like, oh, it's a wonder she's still married if this is her attitude, or it's a wonder, no wonder she's single. You know, you're doomed if you do, you're doomed if you don't. And I think the best you can do is actually to be as much as possible with what I'd call, you know, you'll never make everybody happy. You'll never be judged 100%, you know, by society. Look at social media, for example. But as much as possible, it is very good to be above board, to be thoroughly ethical. Let us not take shortcuts. Let us show that it can be done totally above board. And I say this to your own individualism, because these talents that we are given really are really to make us better. And to a certain extent, make sure that, you know, for whatever you aspire, even from a Christianity sort of level, maybe make sure that you sanctify what you do day to day. Number two, for the greater good of society. And some of this craziness is not good even as a role model. I tell young consultants that the positions in which they've risen, they've actually broken the glass ceiling to a certain extent, and they should begin being role models for other younger individuals, like for ladies to know that you can make it above board. You don't have to take any shortcuts. You don't need to please anyone. You're as good as the next person. And with the lacunas and the quotas that are being created, and talking to those of us who can mentor and sponsor, it can very well be done without the acceptable wild shortcuts that women were made to believe was the only way that they could make it. I hope, Seema, I've answered. You know, I tend to go a little overboard.
No, not at all.
And you so in the same level of being fair to also young men, with power comes accountability. And I think at the end of the day, you're thoroughly answerable about these talents and chances that you were given, even from an ethical perspective. And what goes round comes round. Let us make sure that what we are gifted with actually ends up becoming good for ourselves and good for mankind, good for our children and our families in the aspect of, you know, ethical and humane behavior.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Dr. Chiarier. I love your spirit and attitude towards really driving humanity. I think that really comes out for me as a theme in all the responses that you've given, is we have an overarching responsibility to humanity, whether we are male or female. And I think I take inspiration for you from that. I wanted to come to Ambassador Massakoa. There is a question for you in the question box. specifically asking about some of the principles that you have been keen on following in your leadership journey. Would you like to share those with us?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Seema. I think that 2, 3, let me just start with 2 that I think are very important to me. And one of them is good old-fashioned respect. And for me, respect is very, very important, because respect is simple things like, I think, just treating the other person as your equal. So if I'm going for a meeting, I will be on time. If I make a commitment, I will honor the commitment. If I say I'm going to do something, I will try to do it to the best that I can. And that is respect for self and respect for others. So that for me is very key and is very fundamental in all the work and all the undertakings that I make. I do try to honor what I'm doing, in as much as I try to honor the people that I'm doing it for. And it has shown up in so many different aspects of my life that, you know, sometimes when I deal with in the private sector and I'm talking to youth, one of my responsibilities at the Commonwealth was the youth division. So when I was there conducting sessions for young people, I would not handle the situation any differently than if I was conducting sessions for leaders, because I was also responsible for the political. And therefore, I would meet politicians and deal with them the same way that I would deal with young people, just out of respect, honoring who they are and allowing the time and space to re-engage. The second one is really inclusiveness. And inclusiveness, in my case, is moving from I to we. So I think that in leadership, we see a lot of boasting. We see a lot of, I did this, I did that. And I think it's always very important to bring the team along, to invest in the team. You asked the question earlier on about raising children, and Molly spoke about the support structure. The support structure is very much part of what helps us as women to do the things that we are able to do. And if we don't acknowledge that, and if we don't bring our support structure on board, then again, it is the I as opposed to the we. So sometimes I just feel that it's very, very important to look at that. But just touching on the last point that was made about how women rise. I think that if we look at how women leaders have responded to the COVID crisis, it's also very instructive. A lot of the women, especially in the West, when this whole pandemic was starting and nobody quite knew how to deal with it, the first thing they did is they listened to the advice around the table. They listened to the science. They did what the science told them was supposed to be done. They were risk averse, and therefore they were not going to take chances and just open their economies and do whatever was being done. And we see a lot of their male counterparts were second guessing at some level what the science was saying. At some level, they were willing to take on bigger risks than their female counterparts. So I think, again, just tapping into this emotion, quote unquote, where it is the feminine aspects of the positive aspects that, as Peter said, this is what leadership of today requires. It requires that degree of empathy, that degree of listening, and not coming across as I have all the answers, but sitting around and genuinely asking the question, how can we improve the situation and how can we move forward together, as opposed to, I'm your leader, I have the answers, and this is the way that we are going to go. So I think that those are, if I include that also as a principle, I think those are the three key areas, because in my point of view is that the challenges that we are facing, they really need all of us to contribute to and resort. And if I can respect my colleagues and my counterparts and my juniors as much as I respect my seniors, then it doesn't take away, manners don't take away anything from you. And that's what I really try to push as well, to say, good old fashioned, let's do things the right way. And I think, as Peter was saying earlier, and Dr. Chiarier was saying, even socially, if we adopted the issues of respect, of self-respect as a young woman, self-respect as a young man, because as a young man, out of self-respect, you also have your own boundaries. There are certain things you will not do to the women in your life out of self-respect. So if you don't have that self-respect, then you will do things that in the morning when your mother picks up the paper, you will be shamed and you will say, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. So I think those are, for me, are very core and very crucial.
Thank you, thank you. Respect actually is definitely a very underrated quality, and I think it's very powerful if it's utilized well. And so respect self, respect others, fantastic. Inclusiveness as well is very important in our leadership journeys. I wanted to then throw a question to Molly. Molly, there is a question that has come up around the boardroom, and you sit on very many boards, so I think that you're the right person to answer this question as well. The boardroom is very male dominated. How do we strategically place ourselves to be visible for the upcoming positions?
I don't know. I hope I'll answer that correctly, but I think the only way women can be visible for upcoming positions is to set a track record. And of course, if I say set a track record, you'll ask, so what about a woman who's never sat on a board at all? I think Dr. Masego has just indicated that once you build self-respect, you build a reputation of managing, you build a reputation of, somehow you'll stand out. So women should always stand out and believe in themselves. And there are very different platforms in which women can actually stand out. Okay, maybe talking from a Rwandan perspective, we are a little bit advantaged because we have various platforms where we can actually given opportunities to stand out, and it's easy if you're competent to be singled out. But I also believe that women should support other women. So, for example, if I sit on this particular board and I'm retiring, or if there's a board position that has come up and I know, let's support each other to be on these boards. I hope I've answered that question properly.
I think you have, Molly, and I think maybe just to follow up on your question, I will also respond to a question that's come actually directly to me around how I navigate the intricacies of corporate change and lead teams towards a united purpose, such as the merger for NIC and CBA. I do realize as I read this question that I actually didn't introduce myself properly, and maybe this is a bit late in the day, but let me just take this opportunity to introduce myself. As I was introduced, my name is Sima D'Souza, but I professionally look after customer experience for NCBA Group. And therefore the question around the NIC and CBA merger, because that's what we've just concluded on. And, you know, so the question is really, in light of the still male-dominated banking sector, how do you navigate the intricacies of corporate change? Now, I think my responses are really very similar to what everyone has said here, really. And I think the first thing is really about just doing what you do really, really well. And I think when you start showing your teams and your leaders, et cetera, that you know what you're doing, you're competent at what you're doing, you're proving results, and you're focusing on actually navigating through all of the, you know, the politics that also come with corporate change, I think you'll win. And there's really nothing that beats just hard work, doing what you're supposed to do, keeping it real, keeping it factual, and not deviating on that male-female kind of platform, because I strongly believe that we are just as qualified, and there really is no difference in the way that I would approach a situation and or my next male counterpart would approach a situation. I'm very fortunate that both ex-NIC and ex-CBA, now NCBA, have a very strong focus on women. You know, we have something called Women in NCBA, and the whole platform really has been created around empowering women, making sure that we have equal opportunities at every point in time, making sure that we don't make those uncomfortable situations, you know, specifically like I was saying before, that if you are pregnant and you're not able to be in an area where, you know, the x-ray will affect your baby, that it is not uncomfortable for you to move. I mean, our policies around pregnancies, maternity, etc., are very supportive. In fact, in our boardroom, we have out of the board members, we have 5 board members that are female. Out of our senior management team, 48% of our senior management team is female. And as an organization, 52% of our organization is female at this point in time. And so, you know, there are deliberate steps taken within the organization just to make sure that whilst you're within, you know, you really are portrayed as an, not even portrayed, you are equal. I mean, there's nothing about portraying, there's no plumage here, it is the truth. And I have never felt, fortunately, I have never felt in my career, especially with NCBA and the merger, that I have been treated differently to the next person. And so I think really just to respond to that, it's about being focused on what you want to achieve, making sure you have the skills for achieving it, making sure that you're not letting nonsense come in the way, and making sure that you're calling out stuff if it ever comes. And I think that we've also spoken about that, and removing any aspect that will perceive you out there as being emotional. It's just factual, this is what it is, and moving on. And I think moving on is really key for me as an individual as well. I mean, I think that's how women are so successful, is that ability to move on. So with that, we don't have any more time for questions because we're literally 5 minutes to the end of the session. What I would like to do is just ask a final kind of question to the panelists as we close the session. And thank you all, you know, who've been listening in, for the super questions that have come in, and very engaging session that we've had as a result of the questions that you've shared. But the parting shot really that I would like to ask the panelists, and maybe starting off with Peter, is what would you tell your younger like your 20-year-old self now that you have the experience, and specifically with respect to the current topic of choosing to challenge?
Wow. Okay. So challenge everything. Challenge everything, you know, the norms that you were brought up through, your understanding of gender roles. Then learn empathy, because I wish I had appreciation of empathy as I do now, 30 years later. That's what I would tell my 20-year-old self.
Fantastic, thank you. Ambassador Masegoa, what would you like to say to your 20-year-old self?
To my 20-year-old self, I would say, you've got this. Find your voice and use it.
I love that. You've got this. Molly, how about you?
Actually, mine was almost like Ambassador's. I would tell myself, you can do this. You just need the confidence to do it.
Okay, and Dr. Chiarier. Dr. Chiarier, you're muted.
I've done that over and over again. Sorry. Now, to my 20-year-old self, probably is to be more forgiving and to forgive failure. And as Ambassador has said, to really use failure as a learning point. Because if we walk, we shall fall. But we can use those opportunities as learning points and being better next time. I think that's what I'd say to myself.
Thank you all. Those are such inspiring words. I personally have learned a lot through this session, and you know, where we say challenge everything, make sure you have empathy, you've got this, forgive yourself, learn through your, you know, through your failures. There's so much that has been shared today that will actually help us change the narrative when it comes to women in leadership, and choosing to challenge what we're challenging today. Thank you, panelists, so much for your inspiring words. I truly am appreciative of it and truly inspired. I think I'm going to make a few personal changes myself. And so thank you so much for sharing what you have. I then now would like to just hand over back to Stephen from SBS, who will close for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sima, and thank you for the wonderful moderation. Sima is our deputy director, the deputy director at NCBEC for customer experience. I think you are already changing the narrative in the banking sector, and you have demonstrated with this good moderation of this event. Mine is to thank all the panelists, especially the ambassador. One thing that she didn't mention that I may want to highlight, she said she borrowed inspiration from the parents. I happen to have met the parents, and one thing that probably you don't know is Ambassador Maseho is the daughter to the 42nd president of the Republic of Botswana, Kwet Masire, or Sati Kutumile Masire. And in his biography, for those ones who read, he wrote a book that he said, is it brave or foolish? And I think for most of the African leaders, if you were to look at it, for me, to some level, you might say he was foolish because he was such an honest leader, such inspiring leader that brought up the country that was seen to be extremely poor to what it is today with better governance. If it was some of our leaders today, maybe he will have taken some of those mines where the diamonds were discovered and just gazette them to be their own private land and all that. But instead, I gave it to the government, negotiated for the people, and made the country to be so better and what we are seeing today of a beautiful Botswana. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, Dr. Gladwell. Thank you, Peter, the only man that decided to stand in here. Very good for representing the other part of the gender and bringing it out very well. Thank you, Molly, from the land of 1,000 hills. Thank you for waking up early. I know the time difference is a problem, and especially to the ambassador who had taken up the early morning to be ready by 6 a.m. Thanks, everyone. And I only want to encourage you, we have a course at Shortmore Business School called Women in Leadership, a very nice course that helps to prepare leaders into higher levels of leading. Kindly check in our websites. You can get more information. For those of us who are interested, drop us an email. We can be able to talk with you. Thank you all. And because of time, we can't talk much. Bye, and let's meet next time. Thank you.